The energy pulse hit New Jeju Colony like a wave of invisible light. Alarms blared in every monitoring station. Scientists stared at their screens in confusion and wonder. Nothing like this had ever been detected before. The pulse came from the Veil, from a place everyone thought was empty space. Minho barely made it back to his room before the colony went into emergency mode. He stuffed the EVA suit back into storage and tried to act normal, but his heart wouldn't stop racing. The symbol on his palm still glowed faintly under his skin. He put on a long-sleeved shirt to hide it. His mother came home 2 hours later, her face tight with worry and excitement. She worked in the engineering section, so she had seen all the sensor data. Something big had happened out in the Veil, and the colony administrators were already organizing teams to investigate. Minho wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to tell her about the ship and the crystal sphere and the bodies. But fear kept him silent. What if she was angry? What if they took him away from her? What if the government decided he had contaminated an alien site? That night he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the holographic images from the sphere. Star charts showing galaxies he didn't recognize, symbols that seemed to mean something important, and faces. Alien faces with large eyes and gentle expressions, the four-armed beings who had built the ship. His communication device buzzed softly. It was a message from Jisoo, his best friend. She worked in the colony's communications hub, helping her parents monitor signals. The message was short. "I know it was you out there. Your suit left a signature. We need to talk." Minho felt cold. If Jisoo knew, how long before others figured it out? They met the next morning in one of the colony's observation domes, a quiet place where few people came. Jisoo was 13, a year older than Minho, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "What did you find out there?" she asked quietly. Minho told her everything. As he spoke, he pulled up his sleeve to show her the glowing symbol. Jisoo's eyes went wide, but she didn't pull away. She leaned closer, fascinated. "You have to tell someone," she said. "This is too big to keep secret." "I know," Minho replied. "But what if they don't let me go back? What if there's more to learn?" Before Jisoo could answer, the colony's public address system crackled to life. The administrator's voice echoed through every corridor. "All citizens be advised. Military and corporate vessels are en route to investigate the anomaly in the Veil. The restricted zone is now under complete lockdown. Anyone found in that area will face serious charges." Minho and Jisoo looked at each other. They were out of time, but Minho had already made a decision. That night, using the same equipment as before, he returned to the alien ship. This time, Jisoo helped him from the communications hub, guiding him through the colony's sensor blind spots and warning him when patrol drones came near. The ship was different now. All the lights were on, bathing the interior in soft white light instead of emergency red. The humming had become a gentle rhythm, almost like breathing. Minho made his way back to the bridge, drawn by a feeling he couldn't explain. The crystal sphere was waiting for him. When he entered the room, it floated down from its pedestal and hovered in front of him. This time, Minho didn't hesitate. He reached out and touched it. Images flooded his mind. Not just pictures, but memories. He saw the ship's history, though he couldn't understand all of it. He saw the aliens who built it, a species that called themselves the Villani. They were explorers and scientists, peaceful beings who loved knowledge and art. Then he saw their end. A war with something terrible, machines that consumed everything in their path, turning entire star systems into more of themselves. The Villani called them the Veskera. World after world fell. Galaxy after galaxy went dark. The Villani built ships like this one to escape, to find a new home far from the Veskera. Hundreds of ships launched, each carrying thousands of refugees and all the knowledge of Villani civilization, but most were hunted down and destroyed. The Wanderer, this ship, was one of the last. It had drifted for over 50,000 years, its crew long dead. Its mission failed. Until now, the sphere showed Minho something else, a weapon. The Villani had created something that could fight the Veskera, something that could disrupt the quantum connections that held the machine consciousness together. But it required a specific genetic marker to activate, a marker the Villani had seen in humanity during brief observations of Earth thousands of years ago. The images faded, and Minho found himself face to face with something new. A holographic figure appeared in front of him, shifting and uncertain like a bad video signal. It was the ship's artificial intelligence, damaged but still functional after all these years. The AI tried to speak, but the sounds were garbled and strange. Minho concentrated, and somehow the meaning became clear in his mind. The AI was asking who he was, asking if the Villani had finally found their new home. "No," Minho said softly. "The Villani are gone. I'm human. My name is Minho." The AI processed this for a long moment. Then it showed him more. It showed him that the sphere had bonded with him because he carried the genetic marker. It showed him that the weapon was still on board, still functional. And it showed him something terrifying. The awakening pulse had been sent out automatically, a signal meant to call other Villani ships. But it could also be detected by the Veskara. If they still existed, if they were still hunting, Minho felt sick. How long until they get here? If they're coming? The AI didn't know. It had no way to detect them at this range. But if the Veskara had survived, if they were still out there, they would come. They always came. "We need to warn everyone," Minho said. "The colony, the military, everyone." But before he could move, Jisu's voice crackled in his helmet radio, urgent and afraid. "Minho, you need to hide. Right now. Corporate ships just arrived and they're boarding the vessel. Military is right behind them. They're looking for whoever activated the ship." Minho looked at the AI and the AI looked back. Some understanding passed between them. The AI's holographic form flickered and pointed toward a corridor Minho hadn't explored yet. "I'll help you," the AI seemed to say, though Minho realized he was understanding it through the symbol on his palm, not through sound. "We'll help each other. My name is—" The sound was complex, but Minho heard it as something like, "Hana." "Okay, Hana," Minho whispered. "Show me where to hide." As he ran through the corridors with Hana's guidance, Minho could hear voices in the distance. Corporate security teams calling out to each other as they explored the ship. Military personnel setting up equipment and establishing a perimeter. They were all looking for answers. They were all looking for whoever had woken up this ancient vessel. And somewhere far out in the darkness of space, something else had detected the signal, something that had been waiting for 50,000 years. The Veskara were stirring, turning their attention toward this quiet corner of the galaxy where an old enemy's beacon had just called out. The countdown had begun, and no one on New Jeju knew it yet. The evacuation of New Jeju Colony was a nightmare of organization and heartbreak. Families were torn apart as lottery systems decided who would get seats on the transport ships. Children crying for parents. Parents refusing to leave without their children. People arguing, pleading, sometimes fighting for a chance to survive. Jisu helped coordinate the evacuation from the communications hub. Her parents had gotten seats on an early transport, but she had volunteered to stay behind. When they tried to force her to go with them, she ran and hid until the ship launched. Minho needed her help and she wouldn't abandon him. Director Yuna surprised everyone by ordering her corporate ships to take colonists instead of valuable equipment. "Equipment can be replaced," she said coldly. "Skilled workers cannot." But everyone knew she was calculating the cost of this disaster in terms of future profits. Captain Tejan worked tirelessly to prepare his small fleet for battle. 4 ships against 3 moon-sized constructs. The math was simple and terrible. But he was a military man, and military men didn't give up just because the odds were bad. They fought anyway. The Soul's Pride and the other destroyers began the delicate process of connecting to the Wanderer's power systems. Hijin led the engineering team, working 18-hour shifts to make alien technology interface with human reactors. It shouldn't have been possible, but Hana guided them through every step. Minho spent his time learning to use the harmonic disruptor. Hana showed him how to interface with it through the symbol on his palm. The weapon was designed to fire a wave that would disrupt quantum entanglement across a massive area. The Veskara existed as a distributed consciousness. Their minds spread across their fleet through quantum connections. Break those connections and the constructs would fall apart. But the weapon was precise. Too precise. Minho had to target specific coordinates or risk hitting the colony itself. And he would have to fire it while the Veskara were close enough for the wave to reach them, but far enough that the constructs wouldn't destroy the Wanderer first. On the second day, the Veskara reached the outer colonies. There were mining outposts there, small facilities with a few hundred people each. The constructs didn't fire weapons. They didn't need to. They simply moved close to the outposts and began breaking them down at the molecular level, consuming metal and rock and people to build more of themselves. The messages from those outposts were brief and filled with static. Then they went silent one by one. Minho watched the reports with growing horror. These weren't just machines. They were monsters, things that saw living beings as nothing more than raw materials to be processed. Millions had died to these things over the ages. Entire civilizations had been erased. "We're going to stop them," Jisoo said quietly. She had come to the Wanderer to help, and now she stood beside Minho on the bridge. "We have to." The third day arrived. The Veskara constructs entered the inner system, moving steadily toward New Jeju. Sensors showed them more clearly now. They were beautiful in a terrible way, perfect geometric shapes of black crystal and red energy. They looked like someone had taken mathematical concepts and made them real. The last transport ships launched from New Jeju. 30,000 colonists had been evacuated. 20,000 remained, either by choice or by bad luck in the lottery. They huddled in the colony's deepest shelters, hoping the weapon would work, hoping they would survive. Hyejin finished the final power connections 12 hours before the Veskara arrived. The human ships were now locked to the Wanderer like metal flowers around a stem. Every reactor, every power cell, everything the fleet had was ready to channel into the ancient weapon. Captain Taejin called a final meeting of everyone who had stayed. Military officers, corporate executives, colonists who had volunteered to help, and one 12-year-old boy who held humanity's fate in his glowing palm. "I won't lie to you," the captain said, his voice carrying to everyone through speakers and communicators. "What's coming is beyond anything humanity has faced before. We're outmatched in every way, but we have something those machines don't have. We have courage, we have hope, and we have a weapon that was built specifically to destroy them." He paused, looking at Minho. "And we have someone brave enough to use it." Director Yuna spoke next, her usual cold calculation replaced by something almost human. "I've spent my life building corporate power, making money, climbing ladders. But none of that matters if we don't survive the next day. So I'm authorizing the use of all corporate resources to support this defense. Every ship, every credit, everything we have." Then Hyejin stepped forward and Minho felt his chest tighten. His mother looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes from days without sleep. But she stood straight and spoke clearly. 3 years ago I lost my husband to an accident in the mines. I thought that was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. The worst thing would be losing my son. But Minho has shown me something these past days. He's shown me that even young people can be brave. Even children can make choices that matter. She looked directly at Minho. "I'm scared. I'm terrified. But I'm also proud. So proud of you." Minho felt tears in his eyes, but he blinked them back. He had to be strong. People were counting on him. The meeting ended and everyone went to their positions. Military personnel to their ships, engineers to the power stations, civilians to the shelters. Minho went to the weapon chamber with Jisoo and his mother beside him. Hana's holographic form flickered around them, more unstable than before. The AI was pushing itself to its limits, trying to help, trying to make up for 50,000 years of failure. "Is it going to hurt?" Minho asked quietly as he placed his hand on the weapon's activation panel. Hana's response came through his palm, sad and honest. "Yes, the weapon will use you as a focusing point. It will hurt very much, but it will work." A pause, then, "It should work. The mathematics are sound, the power is sufficient, but I cannot promise. I am damaged. My calculations may be wrong." "Then I guess we'll find out together," Minho said. The Veskara arrived at New Jeju exactly when the sensors predicted. They came slowly, confidently. 3 massive constructs that blotted out the stars. Smaller drones detached from them, each one the size of a destroyer, and began moving toward the colony. Captain Taejin gave the order, and the human fleet opened fire. Missiles and energy beams struck the Veskara constructs, brilliant flashes of light against the darkness. For a moment Minho thought they were doing damage. Then he realized the truth. The impacts weren't hurting the constructs. They were just making small dents that repaired themselves instantly. The Veskara were consuming the energy from the weapons, using it to build more drones. The Soul's Pride took a hit from a Veskara beam. The destroyer's shields flared and died, and part of its hull began to dissolve, broken down into component atoms. Captain Taejin ordered evasive maneuvers, but it was like trying to dodge a mountain. "Minho, you need to fire now," Hyejin said urgently. Before they destroy the fleet. But Minho hesitated. Through Hana, he could see the weapon's calculations. If he fired now, the range would be too great. The harmonic disruptor would spread too thin, weakening before it reached the constructs. It might slow them down, but it wouldn't stop them. Not yet, he said, his voice shaking. They need to be closer, closer? Director Yuna shouted through the communicator. They're destroying us now. Another ship took a hit. The corporate vessel Gyeonggi broke apart, its crew dying in seconds as the Veskera drones tore it apart for raw materials. Minho watched people die and forced himself to wait. The symbol on his palm burned like fire. Hana's form was flickering wildly, the AI barely holding itself together. His mother gripped his shoulder and Jisoo held his other hand. The Veskera moved closer. The soul's pride was crippled now, life support failing, but Captain Taejin refused to order an abandoned ship. The remaining human vessels formed a protective circle around the Wanderer, buying time with their lives. Closer. Another ship died, consumed in seconds. Closer. And then Minho knew. The calculations fell into place in his mind, flowing from Hana through the symbol on his palm. This was the moment. This was the range. Now, he whispered. He pressed his hand fully against the activation panel and felt the harmonic disruptor wake up. The small salvage drone hummed through the darkness of space, its lights cutting through the cosmic dust like tiny stars. Minho sat in his room on New Jeju Colony, his fingers dancing across the control pad as he guided the drone deeper into the veil. His mother had told him 100 times to stay away from this restricted zone, but Minho was 12 years old and curious about everything. The veil was a region of space filled with ancient dust that made sensors go crazy. Most people avoided it. Most people thought it was just empty space with bad interference. But Minho had a feeling there was something more out there. He had been exploring the edges of the veil for 3 months now, going a little deeper each time. His room was small and cramped, filled with spare parts and broken electronics he liked to fix. On the wall was a photo of his father, Dong-hyun, who had died in a mining accident 3 years ago. Minho's mother, Hyejin, worked long hours as an engineer to support them both. She was at work now, which meant Minho had the whole evening to explore. The drone's camera showed nothing but dust and darkness. Then something appeared on the edge of the screen. At first, Minho thought it was just a large asteroid, but as the drone got closer, he realized it was something else entirely. Something massive. Something impossible. It was a ship, but not like any ship Minho had ever seen. The hull was covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shimmer even in the darkness. The ship was huge, maybe 10 times bigger than the largest human vessel. It looked ancient, with pieces of metal worn smooth by millennia of drifting through space. Minho's heart pounded in his chest. He saved the coordinates and pulled the drone back, his mind racing. He should tell someone. He should tell his mother, or the colony authorities. But what if they didn't believe him? What if they took the discovery away from him? What if they said he was making it up? No, he had to see it for himself first. 3 hours later, Minho was floating through space in his mother's old EVA suit. He had snuck it out of storage, along with a small oxygen tank and a portable airlock tube. Getting to the wreck had been easier than he expected. The colony's security was focused on keeping people safe from mining accidents, not stopping kids from sneaking into space. As he approached the alien ship, Minho felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The vessel was even more impressive up close. The geometric patterns on the hull seemed to pulse with a faint light, though that might have been his imagination. He found what looked like an airlock and managed to get it open using the portable tube. Inside, the ship was dark and silent. Minho turned on his helmet light and gasped. The corridors were huge, at least 3 times taller than they needed to be for humans. The walls were covered in a strange moss that glowed with soft blue and green light. It was beautiful and eerie at the same time. He walked carefully through the corridors, his boots making soft thuds on the metal floor. Everything was alien and strange. The doorways were too tall, the corridors too wide. Whatever built this ship was much bigger than humans. Then he found them. The bodies. They were in what looked like a crew quarters, lying on raised platforms that might have been beds. The skeletal remains were tall and elegant with 4 arms instead of 2. Their bones had a crystalline quality, catching the light from his helmet and reflecting it in rainbow colors. Minho felt a deep sadness looking at them. These beings had been alive once, had thoughts and feelings and dreams. Now they were just bones in a dead ship. He continued exploring and found what he thought was the bridge. It was a massive circular room with strange consoles arranged in a pattern he didn't understand. In the center was a pedestal, and floating above it was a sphere made of crystal. The sphere was the only thing on the ship that looked undamaged and new. Minho approached slowly, his hand reaching out almost without thinking. The moment his gloved fingers touched the sphere, everything changed. The sphere flared with brilliant light. Holographic images filled the room, showing star charts and symbols and what looked like a message in an alien language. Minho tried to pull his hand back, but the sphere seemed stuck to him. He felt a burning sensation in his palm, even through the glove. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The holograms faded. The sphere released his hand and floated back to its position above the pedestal. Minho pulled off his glove and looked at his palm. There was a symbol there, glowing faintly blue. It looked like 3 circles connected by curved lines. His heart was racing now. What had he done? What was this thing? Before he could think about it more, the ship began to wake up. Emergency lights flickered on throughout the vessel, bathing everything in red light. Minho heard a deep humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The floor vibrated beneath his feet. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the sound of machinery starting up after a very long sleep. Minho ran. He didn't know what he had activated or what it meant, but he knew he needed to get back to the colony. He raced through the corridors, following the path he had marked on his way in. The moss on the walls was glowing brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with the humming. He made it to the airlock and sealed it behind him. As he pushed off from the alien ship and activated his suit's thrusters, he looked back. The entire vessel was lighting up section by section. It looked like a city waking after a long night. And then he saw the pulse. A wave of energy expanded from the ship in all directions, visible as a ripple in space itself. It passed through him harmlessly, but he knew it wouldn't go unnoticed. That pulse would be visible on every sensor in the colony, every sensor in the whole system probably. As Minho flew back toward New Jeju, trying to think of how he would explain all this to his mother, he didn't notice the symbol on his palm glowing brighter. He didn't know that the pulse had traveled far beyond the colony, out into deep space where ancient machines were waiting and watching. Minho spent 2 days hiding inside the Wanderer. Hana guided him through maintenance tunnels and storage areas that the human search teams hadn't found yet. The ship was enormous, a maze of corridors and chambers that would take months to fully explore. But Minho couldn't hide forever, and he knew it. Back on New Jeju Colony, Jisoo was in trouble. The security teams had traced the communications that helped Minho avoid the patrols. They brought her in for questioning along with her parents. She sat in a small room while a woman in a corporate uniform asked her questions over and over. The woman's name was Director Yuna Choi, and she represented the Daesong Corporation that owned New Jeju. She was smart and ruthless, and she knew Jisoo was hiding something. But Jisoo refused to give Minho up. She claimed she had just been doing routine communication checks, nothing more. Meanwhile, Minho's mother, Hyejin, was going out of her mind with worry. Her son had been missing for 2 days. She had searched his room and found the EVA suit missing. She knew where he must have gone, but she didn't tell the authorities, not yet. First, she volunteered to join the engineering team analyzing the alien ship. The military had arrived in force. Captain Taejin Song commanded a destroyer called the Soul's Pride, along with 3 smaller escort vessels. He was a careful man who had fought in the border wars against pirates. He knew that something this big, this important, could cause serious problems if not handled correctly. Captain Taejin and Director Yuna did not like each other. The military wanted to secure the alien ship for humanity's protection. The corporation wanted to study it for profit and technological advancement. They argued constantly about who had authority, who had rights, who would make the decisions. Deep inside the Wanderer, Minho was learning. Hana showed him more of the ship's systems every day. The AI was damaged, its memory fragmented, but it remembered enough. It showed him the Villani culture, their art and music and science. It showed him their desperate flight from the Veskera, and it showed him the weapon. The harmonic disruptor was hidden in the deepest part of the ship, in a chamber that had been sealed for 50,000 years. Hana took Minho there on the 3rd day. The weapon didn't look like much, just a large cylindrical device covered in the same geometric patterns as the ship's hull. But Hana explained through the connection in Minho's palm that this device could destroy the Viscara. But there's a problem, Minho said, understanding flooding through him from Hana's damaged memories. It needs someone with the genetic marker to activate it. Someone like me. Hana's holographic form flickered in agreement. The Villani had designed the weapon to require a living operator, because they feared it could be used by the Viscara if captured. Only a being with biological consciousness and the specific genetic pattern could make it work. And you think humans have this pattern? Minho asked. Hana showed him data from long ago when Villani scout ships had passed through Earth's solar system. They had detected something in human DNA, something rare that matched the marker. The Villani had been planning to return, to offer humanity a place among the refugee fleet. But the Viscara found them first, and the Wanderer had fled deeper into space, eventually drifting into this quiet region where it had waited for millennia. Minho sat down on the chamber floor, his mind spinning. This was too much for a 12-year-old kid from a mining colony. This was the kind of thing that governments and militaries should handle. Not him. I need to tell them, he said finally. I need to tell everyone what this ship really is. But before he could move, alarms blared throughout the Wanderer. Hana's form flickered wildly, showing distress. Through their connection, Minho felt what the ship's sensors had detected. Something was coming. Multiple massive objects emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. The Viscara had found them. Minho ran. He ran through corridors and up access shafts, Hana guiding him toward the areas where the human teams were working. He had to tell them. He had to warn them what was coming. He burst into what the humans had designated as the command section, right in the middle of a heated argument between Director Yuna and Captain Tajan. Security guards grabbed him immediately, but Minho was shouting, trying to make them listen. They're coming. The Viscara are coming. We have maybe 3 days before they get here. Everyone stopped. The room went silent. Then his mother pushed through the crowd and grabbed him, holding him tight while tears ran down her face. She had been so scared, so worried, and here he was alive but talking nonsense about things coming from space. Minho, what are you talking about? Captain Tajan asked, his voice firm but not unkind. So Minho told them everything. He showed them the symbol on his palm, still glowing faintly. He told them about Hana and the Villani and the 50,000-year journey. He told them about the weapon and the genetic marker, and why the ship had sent out its signal. Most importantly, he told them about the Viscara. Director Yuna wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination. But the ship's sudden alarm couldn't be ignored. Captain Tajan immediately ordered his ships to scan the edge of the system. What they found made everyone's blood run cold. 3 enormous objects had appeared in deep space, each one the size of a small moon. They were moving slowly but steadily toward the inner system, toward New Jeju. The objects were made of some kind of dark crystalline metal, geometric and wrong-looking, like something that shouldn't exist in normal space. Viscara, Minho whispered, and Hana's holographic form appeared beside him, confirming it with a flicker of sad light. The room erupted into chaos. People shouting questions, demanding answers, making plans. Captain Tajan was already on his communicator, calling for reinforcements from the United Earth Fleet. Director Yuna was calculating how long it would take to evacuate the colony, but Minho and Hana knew the truth. Reinforcements would take weeks to arrive. Evacuation ships could only carry a fraction of the colony's 50,000 people, and the Viscara would be here in 3 days. Director Yuna grabbed Minho's arm, her eyes hard. This weapon you mentioned, can it stop them? Maybe, Minho said, but it needs power. A lot of power, more than the Wanderer has. Then we give it power, Captain Tajan said, his voice cutting through the noise. We connect our ships to it. We give it everything we have. That's insane, someone protested. We don't know if it will even work. Do we have a choice? Hyejin spoke up, her engineer's mind already working on the problem. If what Minho says is true, if those things out there really are what destroyed an entire civilization, then we have to try something. Over the next hours, a plan came together. The military and corporate ships would link their power cores to the Wanderer's systems. Hyejin would lead the engineering team to make the connections work. Hana would guide them through the alien technology, and Minho, because he had the genetic marker, would have to be the one to activate the weapon. Absolutely not. Hyejin said when they explained this part. He's 12 years old. I'm not letting him risk his life like this. Mom, Minho said quietly. The Villani chose humans for this. Not just any humans, me. I have to do it. They looked at each other, mother and son, and Hyejin saw something in her son's eyes that hadn't been there before. He had grown up somehow in the past few days. He had seen things and learned things that changed him. She pulled him close and held him, wishing things could be different, wishing his father was here to help make this impossible decision. Captain Taejin gave the evacuation order. All non-essential personnel would leave on transport ships immediately. But there wouldn't be enough ships for everyone. Some would have to stay and hope the weapon worked. As the colony erupted into organized chaos, Minho stood on the Wanderer's bridge with Hana's flickering form beside him. Through the viewport he could see the distant stars. Somewhere out there the Veskara were coming, ancient machines that had destroyed entire galaxies, and standing against them was a 12-year-old boy, a broken AI and a handful of human ships. The symbol on Minho's palm glowed brighter, and he knew that whatever happened next would change humanity forever. Pain exploded through Minho's body like lightning. Every nerve screamed as the harmonic disruptor drew power through him, using his body and mind as a living circuit. He tried to scream but couldn't make a sound. The symbol on his palm blazed white-hot, so bright he could see the bones in his hand through his skin. His mother was screaming his name, but he couldn't hear her. Jisoo was trying to pull him away from the weapon, but his hand was locked to it, fused by energy that was neither heat nor electricity, but something else entirely. Through the pain, Minho felt the weapon charging. Power flowed from the human ships, from their reactors and engines. Everything they had poured into the Wanderer's systems. The ancient vessel groaned and shuddered, metal creaking under impossible stress. Lights flickered throughout the ship, and then the weapon fired. The harmonic disruptor released a wave of invisible energy that rippled outward from the Wanderer in all directions. It passed through the human ships harmlessly, passed through the colony, passed through space itself. But when it reached the Veskara constructs, something changed. The massive geometric ships began to sing. It was a terrible sound, transmitted through radio frequencies and sensor arrays, a harmonic resonance that made teeth ache and minds hurt. The Veskara constructs vibrated, their perfect crystalline structures responding to frequencies they couldn't ignore. On the Soul's Pride, Captain Taejin watched his sensors with wide eyes. The constructs were breaking apart, not exploding or melting, but simply coming undone, pieces separating from pieces as the quantum connections that held them together failed. The drones stopped moving. The beams ceased firing. The three moon-sized constructs began to collapse in on themselves, their geometric perfection becoming chaos. Smaller and smaller they compressed, matter and energy falling into singularities that appeared at their cores. Then, in three simultaneous flashes of white light, the Veskara fleet vanished, consumed entirely by miniature event horizons that flickered and died, leaving only empty space and drifting debris from the human ships that had been destroyed. The battle was over. The Veskara were gone, but the cost was terrible. On the Wanderer, Minho collapsed as the weapon finally released him. His hand was burned, the symbol now a permanent scar on his palm. He couldn't feel his legs, couldn't feel much of anything except a bone-deep exhaustion that made him want to sleep forever. His mother caught him before he hit the floor, crying and laughing at the same time. Jisoo was there too, her face pale but relieved. Around them, the Wanderer's systems were dying. Conduits exploded. Power cores burned out. The ancient ship had given everything it had. Hana's holographic form appeared one last time, but it was barely visible now, just a flicker of light and static. Through their fading connection, Minho felt the AI's emotions: gratitude, relief, and sadness, because this was the end. "Thank you," Hana's voice whispered in Minho's mind. "Thank you for finishing what we started. Thank you for being worthy." "Don't go," Minho whispered back, his voice weak. "Please don't go." But Hana was already fading. The AI's consciousness had been stretched too thin, pushed too hard. It scattered into the dying ship's network like smoke and wind, leaving behind only fragments and echoes. The last thing Minho felt from Hana was peace. The days that followed were a blur of medical treatment and debriefing. Minho spent a week in the colony hospital, recovering from what the doctors called extreme neural stress. His hand would never fully heal. The scar remained, a permanent reminder of what he had done. The human ships limped back to the colony. Of the 4 vessels that had faced the Vescara, only 2 survived intact. The Soul's pride was so badly damaged it had to be towed. Captain Tajan lost half his crew, good men and women who had given their lives to buy time for the weapon to charge. Director Yuna's corporate flagship had been destroyed along with 300 personnel. But Yuna herself survived, and the experience changed her. She threw herself into helping rebuild, using corporate resources without calculating profit margins. The evacuation transports returned to find New Jeju scarred but standing. Of the 20,000 people who remained in the colony, 18,000 survived. 2,000 had died when the colony's outer sections were damaged by stray Vescara fire. Every name was read aloud at the memorial service. Every person was remembered. Before Hana's consciousness scattered completely, the AI had transferred the Villani archives to the colony's computer systems. Thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, science, art, and culture. It would take humanity generations to fully understand it all, but it was there, waiting. The Wanderer itself was too damaged to repair. Engineers examined it and determined that the ship's core systems had burned out beyond recovery. But the vessel was turned into something else, something important. It became a memorial station, a monument to the Villani civilization and the humans who had died defending their new home. Minho stood in front of a huge crowd 6 months later. The United Earth government had come to New Jeju to present awards to the survivors. He wore a formal suit that felt strange and uncomfortable, so different from his usual clothes. Captain Tajan, still recovering from his injuries, pinned the Star of Valor to Minho's chest. It was humanity's highest honor, never before given to someone so young. The crowd applauded, but Minho barely heard them. He was thinking about Hana, about the Villani, about all the beings who had died fighting the Vescara across millennia. When it was time for him to speak, Minho stood at the podium and looked out at thousands of faces, colonists who had survived, families of those who had died, military personnel, corporate executives, media representatives from a dozen worlds. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried through speakers to everyone present. The Villani searched for 50,000 years for someone worthy of their legacy. They crossed galaxies looking for a new home, for someone who could continue their fight. And they found us. They found humanity. He paused, looking down at his scarred palm. But I don't think we were worthy because we're strong or smart or special. I think we were worthy because when something terrible came for us, we didn't run. We stood our ground. We protected each other. We sacrificed for each other. He raised his head. The Villani had a saying. Hana told me. It means the smallest light can guide the longest journey. I think that's what we are. Small lights in a big dark universe. But together, we can shine bright enough to guide our way forward. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then the applause started, growing louder and louder until it shook the walls. After the ceremony, Minho walked with his mother and Jisoo to the observation dome where he had first told Jisoo about his discovery. They stood looking out at the stars, at the Wanderer floating in silent orbit nearby. What are you going to do now? Jisoo asked. Minho pulled out a datapad. On it were the first files from the Villani archives, translated into human language by teams of scientists. Mathematics, physics, biology, engineering. So much knowledge. Waiting to be learned. I'm going to study, he said simply. Hana gave us everything the Villani knew. It would be wrong not to learn from it. Hyejin put her arm around her son's shoulders. He was taller now, growing fast. But he was still her boy. Still the curious kid who liked to explore and fix broken things. Your father would be proud, she said softly. I wish he could have seen this. Me too, Minho replied. They stood there for a long time, looking at the stars. Somewhere out in that vast darkness, more Vescara might be waiting, more threats to humanity and other species. The universe was huge and full of dangers, but it was also full of wonders, full of possibilities, full of people willing to stand together against the darkness. Minho opened the datapad and began to read. There was so much to learn, so much to discover. The Villani had given humanity a gift beyond measure. Knowledge, hope, a chance to become something greater, and Minho would not waste it. In orbit above, the Wanderer hung silent in space. its mission finally complete after 50,000 years. The ship was dark now, its systems dead. But it remained a beacon of a different kind. A reminder that even after the longest night, light could return. That even the smallest person could change the course of history. That humanity, young and small in the cosmic scale, had proven itself worthy of the legacy left by ancient civilizations. The story of the Wanderer was over, but humanity's story, informed and enriched by Vellani wisdom, was just beginning. And Minho, the curious 12-year-old who had found a drifting shipwreck in the darkness, would help write the next chapters. Looking up at the memorial station that had once been an alien ark, Minho smiled. The scar on his palm tingled slightly, and for just a moment he thought he heard Hana's voice one last time. "Thank you, friend. May your journey be long and filled with light." Then the feeling faded and there was only silence, but it was a peaceful silence full of promise and hope. The smallest light had guided them through their darkest hour, and tomorrow, that light would shine even brighter.